the real, raw, honest conversations about parenting teenagers in today's world. No filters, no sugarcoating, just truth, compassion, and practical insight from experts, educators, and parents who are right in the trenches alongside you. This podcast is where parents come to hear the conversations they didn't even know they needed. My mission is simple: to help you feel supported, informed, and empowered so you can build the connection with your teen that you truly want. If you want to go deeper into this work with me, stay until the end, and I will share how you can connect with me. From my heart to yours, thank you for being here, for doing the hard work of parenting, and for choosing to grow right alongside your teen. Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for today's world. And today's conversation is one every parent of a neurodivergent teen needs, especially if you're starting down that transition into high school and what comes after it. I am joined by Vicki Christensen, founder of Blue Glasses Advocacy, parent advocate, and mom of two incredible sons, including her 21-year-old with a global developmental delay and 17-year-old with ADHD. Vicki doesn't just understand the system, she has lived it, challenged it, and helped reshape it. From IEP navigation to what actually happens when your child ages out of support, she brings a level of honesty, strategy, and grounded advocacy that most parents don't even realize they're missing. This is the conversation that fills in the gap no one prepared you for. Welcome to the show, Vicki.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited, but let's start with, why are you here? What are you doing? What's the point? What's all this Vicki stuff? I want to know.
Well, if you'd like, I can just tell you a little bit about myself and how this neurodivergent journey began for me. I'm a mom, first and foremost, and my son, Luke, who's now 21, was born with a very rare chromosome disorder. So early on, he was my first child, and all the doctors and specialists we saw, they could not find anyone else in the world who had the same chromosomes as Luke. So I think starting my journey, looking back 21 years ago, I realized just how isolated I felt back then, even with supported friends and family. I felt very alone. I felt scared. There were no answers. Yeah. I heard a lot of he may never. And even the smallest thing like colic, I was told could be brain damage and we better see a neurologist. We better get an MRI. So we spent the first few years of Luke's lives medical appointments, therapy. He started physical therapy and occupational therapy when he was 4 months old at Children's Hospital. So not a typical journey for your first child, but it was a learning experience. And now I'm happy to share my journey and what I learned from it and what I took from it with other parents.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And the first thing that popped into my head was, well, who do you lean on? Like, yes, you have friends, yes, you have family, but if somebody hasn't been through the process or really has that empathy, like I know exactly how you feel. Like, what do you say to parents right now? And that's a totally different, lean where I'm going right now, but I think that's important. Like if a parent is sitting here listening to it going, yeah, I have this situation and nobody I know has literally gone through it. They can sympathize, but they can't empathize. What would you recommend they do at this point if they're new in this journey?
I think the first thing is just kind of honor your feelings. I mean, acknowledge that it is difficult. It is hard. And I would really encourage parents to reach out to early intervention. Depending on where you live, the Department of Developmental Services, get connected as soon as possible. Look into your school systems. Many districts have amazing early intervention programs. And that is where I first met what I call my people. When Luke was 2 years old and he started preschool in a public school, and there was a social worker, Nancy, who's amazing, and she ran a parent support group on Wednesday morning. So our kiddos were in the room next door. And I met other parents who were walking a similar path, not the same, because there's only one other person in the world, like my son.
Yeah.
But not the path that they thought they were going to be walking as a parent. So we shared a lot of similar feelings, kind of worry, frustration, like 2 a.m. internet searches. What if, like worrying about all these things in the future when really we should just be enjoying our children.
Yeah.
They're 2, some are even younger. So reach out, try to find your people as soon as possible. Talk to your pediatrician, talk to other parents, communicate. They are out there. You just have to find them.
And, I've been just the last week, I've been doing a lot of posts, like quick reels, because I find that parents are jumping into Facebook groups. And in those private Facebook groups, there is a lot of judgment and a lot of toxic advice. And I feel like saying, please don't go down that, but they are not your people. They are not your community. I don't know if you know of any online communities parents can like tap into that feel safe, or we can put it in the show notes later. But parents, like seriously, please, for the love of God, stop asking complete strangers in a Facebook group about how to parent your child. And, you get, well, back in the day, or just a slap in the head, or just like, oh my God, stop, please. Those are not your people. Those are not your people.
So true. I'm part of many special education related Facebook groups. And I don't do a lot of interaction for that very reason. But I read, just as an advocate, parents put questions out there about special education and IEPs. And the answers that I'm getting, they make me cringe, because I'm like, no.
Yes.
You have to fact check. Absolutely. That's why I'm just, finding your community or finding your people in your community, people, social workers, medical practitioners, teachers, right? They're out there. Just keep asking and find them. But definitely be cautious about just social media and getting advice from people you don't know.
Yeah. I spent a little bit of time thinking I'm going to jump into these groups and, just answer some honest questions, like see if I can help people. And I get out as fast as I get in. I feel sick. It's like, no, because you can't even say, do you want to fact check that? Because that takes you down another vortex. So this is gone completely sideways. This is one we were going to talk about, but it is a big, important note for parents. Your people are not in a private Facebook group that are complete strangers helping you raise your child. No, they're not there. No. Look elsewhere. Follow Vicki's advice on this.
Your people are in your community. Yeah. Right. We all have family and friends who may live out of state or far away, but your people are also in your community. So you have to find them, and they are out there.
Yeah,
absolutely. The more you ask, I think, parents will be surprised what that leads to. Well, I know somebody with the school district, or I know this, amazing pediatrician who works with developmental disorders, and then they will lead you to more people. So they're out there.
Love it. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go down. We're going to talk IEPs. And I know there's a big difference between an elementary school IEP and a high school IEP. But if people are, we're going to have parents jumping in here going, we've had an IEP for 152 years. And then you're going to have I don't exaggerate at all. And then you're going to have someone come in and say, we're just developing an IEP. So can you really clarify for parents, what is an IEP and what is the point of an IEP and what should be the point of an IEP?
Right. So an IEP, or an Individualized Education Program, is it's a document, an often very long document, that first of all addresses a student's baselines or present levels, or what they're doing right now, academically, social, emotionally, behaviorally, health. They look at all areas of need. So what is the student doing today? And then they determine what are students, the IEP determines what is the student's strengths and what are some areas that need some intervention. So based upon that information, which is data is gathered through assessments, they develop IEP goals. Mm-hmm. And how are those goals worked on? They're worked on through IEP services and support. So yes, an elementary school IEP often looks and is really implemented differently than a middle school or a high school IEP. Just the structure of how the school is, but for all students with IEPs, it's really making sure that the student has the supports and the services they are entitled to access their education.
Mm-hmm. And so here in Canada, you're not Canadian.
No, I'm in San Diego.
That's awesome. Oh, wait. So here in Canada, the grade 1 to grade 8, so our elementary, or even 7 and 8 would be our middle school, but we have very few middle schools now. Look like it could be up to 15 to 20 pages. Every single class that they take has very specific, very, very specific, very measurable goals. Mm-hmm. And this is what parents are used to looking at. And they vary from class to class. We have our kids who are just like numbers, no problem. And some that are like math averse, like me, but can give you a story and tell you exactly what's happening. So, and phys ed and all of those look very different. And then they transfer into high school. So our grade 9 and up IEPs are literally, unless there's a behavior safety plan or something attached to it, is 3 pages.
Quite different than here in the States.
3 pages, yes. Mm-hmm. And what it's very much, you can customize it. And it's kind of a dichotomy because there's very much a drop-down menu for a lot of the accommodations, like 30 accommodations that you can click. So in that sense, it's almost like, well, this is very cookie cutter. It looks the same as everybody else's. Why is it the same? However, there are a lot of accommodations that are education for all, like a really good accommodation for anybody in the room, never mind everybody with an IEP.
Sure.
So how is that different from what you know, first of all, in high school? And what do you think are the benefits and not a benefit of having a smaller IEP? I mean, first of all, you're thinking high school, right? Each teacher has 90 students in a semester, 30. So, I mean, to me, that's right away is like having a 3-page IEP, probably helpful. But I want you to speak to that. Like, what do you think about that and about customizing and cookie cutter? It's a really long question. So,
sure. I think first and foremost, it needs to be individualized always. But so a big difference is the IEPs here in the States are typically anywhere from 30 to 60 pages. And that is for elementary school through high school. They are very long, very verbose documents. I worked with a student last week, and now this student is medically complex, IEP goals in just about every area. 19 IEP goals. So we don't see such a change in the length of the document from elementary to middle school or even to high school. What kind of changes for us is how those services are delivered. But to your point about the length of the document, and especially going into high schools where teachers have 90 students in a semester or more here, I think you don't want too much on the IEP, right? Like I often tell parents, let's make sure we have goals where they are needed. Let's make sure they're SMART goals, right? They're very specific. They're very measurable. They're not in themselves too verbose. But I do believe when an IEP becomes such an involved document with multiple goals and accommodations, I have seen 50, 60 accommodations on an IEP. And while that is easier to implement, because we're talking about two things, we're talking about the document and the length of the document, and then you have the implementation piece. And that's the really tricky part.
Yeah.
How do you implement this document over the next school year? So longer document, more IEP goals definitely does not equal a better outcome for a student.
Yeah.
But what you want those SMART IEP goals. You want communication. So let's talk about those high school students right now who accommodations, in my opinion, become so important in high school, but more difficult than ever to have implemented with fidelity. Not because teachers don't want to, because sometimes some teachers don't really understand what accommodation is. Some teachers are just overwhelmed because they have so many students, and about 15% of them have IEPs, and they all have different accommodations. One student might be, well, they get 2 extra class days to turn in an assignment. Another student might be completely different. So I always encourage between the case manager or the special education or general education teachers, communicate. Let's put the very most important things in that IEP into like an IEP at a glance. Every teacher should have that, but also communication as much as possible from the student to the teachers. Now, students, they don't have to ask, right? They never have to ask to use their accommodations. They are available for them, but let's promote and let's work on self-advocacy, right? To get those students to communicate with their teachers. Now I recently had a post on TikTok, and I'm not on TikTok very often, so I don't follow it. And I put this reel about implementing, like how students don't have to ask permission to access their accommodations. Oh my goodness. I had so many, I did not mean for it to be a controversial post. Teachers, parents, students who all had different opinions. And so I want to clarify, students never have to ask permission to use them, but we want to teach self-advocacy skills because it's a life skill. And let's be honest, while you can get accommodations in college, it may not look the same as in high school.
You have to ask.
Absolutely. So we want, if a student needs a self-advocacy IEP goal, I'm all for it, because if they're not advocating for their accommodations, for their IEP, let's teach them how to do it, because you're looking at college or you're looking at the real world. And I always tell my families and the students I work with, we all have accommodations. At the beginning of every day, I have my Post-it and I look at my planner and I write down the things I have to get done that day. That's an accommodation I have implemented for myself. So we have to learn how to do this, and we have to learn how to communicate.
Yeah, I agree. And I find too, there's so many accommodations in high school that feel so subjective, like they get a break. Well, they took a 2-hour break. Well, it says I can have a break. Well, I mean, so there's your communication piece. Like if you're looking, and I know teachers are busy. I've been there. I totally understand. But if you front end load some of this at the beginning of the year, even before school starts, a couple days before, you're getting hold of talking to kids, say, okay, what does this break look like for you? Perfect. And if you need a break, that's great. But if we let's collaborate on when that good time for a break is. Because if I'm in the middle of a lesson and it's engaging in the class and you're going to miss that whole thing, you're going to miss the engagement as well. Not that you're going to miss a lesson. Yes, I can give it to you again. But, and those subjective breaks or, things like even extra time, like how much extra time does that actually mean? Or even the accommodation where, yes, I get to hand in my assignment 30 days later. But if we're not in communication, the kid has ADHD. So guess when they're starting that assignment? The
Day 29th
day. That's
every
me.
time.
100.
Every
so
time.
What does extra time look like to hand in an assignment? Well, very often could be, I want to see your first draft.
Yeah.
I want to see a couple of questions. I want to see that you're breaking it down into like when you see it on IEP, it's just extra time or breaks. It can be very subjective, and that's where the meetings, I think, with parents and students with their teachers come in handy.
Absolutely. And I know the accommodations, like you mentioned, are very often in a drop-down menu, but I know on our IEPs, there is a place where you can add comments. So I always, around breaks, and I have a son with ADHD who gets breaks, and he wasn't identified for an IEP until he was a freshman in high school. A mom of a child, who's neurodivergent since he was born, and an advocate, and my son, I didn't know. So he gets breaks. And the same thing, he was taking advantage of them. Absolutely. Walking around campus. So we had to define what that looks like. So if you need a break during instruction, maybe you can stand up for a little bit. Maybe you don't have to leave the classroom, right? Maybe you can just take a little brain break. And if you do take a break, like to your point, let's talk about when the right time is, because sometimes students just need to know that break is coming, right? It's not 100%. Right now, but it's in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's when maybe they're doing independent work and I could get up, use the restroom, walk around campus, just move my body a little bit. But defining 3 minutes, 5 minutes, because you don't want to miss the time to do the work. And then to your point about extra time, that is it's an accommodation. It's a slippery slope, right?
Yes.
Because so often I see students that have this mountain of work because they get extra time. So always clarify how much extra time do they need, right? Is it one class period? I try to say, you have to look at the student and how much time do they realistically need, but maybe one class period. I wouldn't go much beyond that, to be honest with you. And there could be exceptions, right? So many teachers, if the student sends an email or talks to them and says, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm working on this. I'm not quite there. I just need, teachers are fine with it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And
communicate.
And giving, and, I think when we start even grade 8 and grade 9, when parents are sitting in meetings with their kid, with their teachers, the kid is sitting beside them. They don't have to talk at the beginning. They don't have to participate, but they understand what advocacy is. So we're advocating with our kids, not for our kids, because we're not teaching them anything by doing for. So I want to understand then. So, oh my goodness, this whole 30-page IEP in high school has got me like, I'm going to break out in hives. But anyway, so what are our parents? So if parents are going from elementary school to high school, what is it that parents are assuming an IEP will do for them in high school that isn't true anymore? Is there like this?
So the model here is very different. In elementary school, we have what's called pull-out or like resource room or a learning center. And very often if a student, let's say, needs extra help in math, well, then they might have an IEP service that gives them maybe 30 minutes 3 times a week to work in a separate classroom that's led by a special education teacher, usually with aides in that classroom, to work on those goals, whatever their goals are in math. And they're usually small classrooms. So maybe a 1-to-3, a 1-to-2 ratio is what I typically see. When students get to middle school, which here is either 6th or 7th grade, depending on the district, we don't see those small special education like pull-out classes for gen ed primary place students. There are often co-taught classes. So a class like a math class, core standards. So, it's you're learning 6th or 7th grade math, but you have 2 teachers. You have a general education teacher and a special education teacher. So not really getting that individualized attention, or at least not all the time. It kind of depends on how many students in that class have an IEP. How often can that special education teacher work with those students? And then when you get to high school, there's co-taught classes, but they also have, in place of an elective, what's called a directed studies class. And that's a class
we have the same thing. We call it learning strategies. Okay.
Yeah, some of the districts do call it learning strategies.
Yeah.
So led by a special ed teacher, an educational specialist. And that is where students can get support on their IEP goals. And it's also the place that I find a lot of that communication happens. So my 17-year-old son has directed studies and has a wonderful relationship with his case manager who teaches that class. So that is where he is learning. So my son has a lot of executive functioning, organization planning, a lot of difficulty in those areas. So that's where he's learning to use a digital planner, check his assignments, email his teachers, but then check your email. So if they respond to you, because that piece was missing for a long time. So that's where he's learning those, like working on those executive functioning goals, as well as they have an aide in that classroom where he's getting help in math and algebra too. So it's a separate classroom. It often takes the place of an elective, but it's a different model than in elementary school. And I just want to acknowledge that some high schools only offer one elective, and it's a difficult decision for students to make. Do I take drama because that is my passion, right? That is what I want to do in life, to take this directed studies class. It's tough.
Yeah, we have we have 2 electives here, but it's the same. The kids are just like, oh, but I want to do this and this. And yes, this was helpful, but when you're grade 9, like, no, I just want to do the fun stuff. My friends are going over here.
Right. And not only are you not doing the fun stuff, you're doing the hard stuff for you.
Yeah. That also feels like sometimes sets you apart, which is not easy either. Oh, you're in that class. Like, oh, yeah.
Right. It's so true.
Yeah. And we have to, there's not, it is a good strategy. So it's one that we have to, pump up, because I think it is a good strategy, but I have to empathize for the kids at the same time. But,
yeah, I agree. Yeah. I don't have the answers to it, but I have seen some districts implement a 0 period. So not fun for many people to have to get up early, but I am seeing more and more districts implement something like that. So then they can take their elective.
Interesting. That's actually not a terrible idea. Okay. So I want to know now, in your years of advocating, what are some subtle signs that a teen is not being supported? They're really struggling. Everything looks good on paper, but you're seeing something else. What are signs parents could be looking for, or even teachers who are trying to?
Sure. I'd say for parents, school refusal, not wanting to get up in the morning, right? Seeing some personality changes, especially around school and going to school. I would say for teachers, students who just aren't paying, they appear not to be paying attention, tardies, missing class, right? Sometimes I've seen it manifest itself with some behavior issues, right? Getting in trouble, suspensions. All of a sudden they start acting out. And what you really find is that their school confidence is clinically significant. They just don't feel smart, right? I work with a lot of high school students with IEPs who were identified later in the process, and they're really intelligent individuals, but they have learning disabilities of some sort, or they have issues with ADHD and inattention, and school is really hard for them, right? And they get frustrated because their friends don't work half as hard as they think as they are working, and they're getting better grades.
Yeah.
And sometimes, let's be honest, there's a lot of pressure. Parents, right? We could come down on our students because, are you not doing enough homework at night? Are you not working hard enough?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the student's saying, I'm doing everything I can, but I'm tapped out and I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a big problem with homework.
And then you took, if a student's an athlete, sports after school go 2.5 hours. And then the games or meets, they're missing class because they have to get on the bus and go to an away meet. And so then you talk about missing instruction, and it snowballs very often. But I would look for personality changes. I would talk, parents talk to your children.
Yes.
Ask them how it's going. And it's so often not a result of not working hard enough, but not having the right supports in place in school. And there's this amazing psychologist that I often work with, and she has this way she'll assess students and she talks to them. And she said this to my son, and I've been in meetings where she's told other students the same thing. You're really smart, but school will always be hard for you. And it's really important for you to know that. You're going to have to work hard, and your grades may not be what some of the other friends seem to do easily. But what I want to tell you is you're going to do great in life because you're learning these life skills. You're working on self-advocacy. You're working on planning and organization and giving thought to what you want to do with your life and work ethic, right? Let's talk about the work ethic these students have.
Yeah.
And she tells students this, and then they hear that. I think it resonates with them. And it's important for a lot of these students to know that it's not having an IEP doesn't make it easy.
No.
Even if it's implemented with fidelity, it doesn't make it easy. It gives them access, right? Equal access to their learning and to their education. But school still may be difficult for a lot of students.
And I find when the kids get to grade 12, they are discouraged. The parents are discouraged. And this is when you can kind of shine a light and say, yes, but they have had 4 years in 4 walls that do not work for them. They're forced to take some subjects they can't stand, are not strong in, and it's exhausting. But then they go off to college. And they get to pick their own courses. They get to take reduced course loads. And we'll talk about the transition. But I just think if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, it's March and my kid's graduating in June, and I don't know what the, if he sucks at high school, what's going to happen at college? Listen, let me shed a light on. Kids flourish in post-secondary, some of them, with accommodations, 100%. But they get to pick everything they love. In a place where they can get up and move around. There's so much more freedom, and there's not, you have to take geometry, and you couldn't stand geometry. You don't understand it.
Right.
Now you can take, so don't be discouraged. For parents who are listening and starting to really panic, please don't be discouraged. It's not the end of the world. It's usually opening Pandora's box.
That's a very good and important point, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So true. A lot of my experience really isn't in the 4-year colleges or universities. I work with IEP teams to make sure that there's a transition process in place. And then I can direct families, to reach out to the Office of Disabilities, whatever it is. Every university seems to call it something different. But I also work a lot with students who may not be going to a 4-year university. They might be starting with a community college or going into an adult transition program. So there's so many different paths that a student can take, but that's a very important point. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, and I want to talk about aging out. Talk about there are some kids who are not going to post-secondary anything.
Absolutely.
And, here they can stay in school till they are 25. No, it's changed now. It's 2 or 3 additional years now. I think it's changed since I left a few years ago. But they do have extended time if they have a diagnosis. They do not have to graduate grade 12 at, in 4 years. They get an extended time. But eventually, 21. Thank you.
21. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My brain just went. So what happens? How do we help our parents and our kids age out of school with some goals, with some success, without feeling like, okay, here's the couch, here's a potato. Right. Sorry, but I think a lot of parents are really scared about that. And I think it has happened. So how do we successfully age our kids out of high school?
So here it's 22. So if a student is not diploma bound, but certificate of completion bound, and in an adult transition program, they age out at 22. So the really important thing to do is to back plan. So when a student here is 16, we create an individualized transition plan. And this is where we start talking about what life might look like after school, or even what electives do you want to take here? What do you want adult transition? Because after the 4 years of high school, they go into an adult transition program that is within the school district. So let's start talking about work and volunteer opportunities and how you might want to be involved in the community. And I even hear from schools like, oh, you're only 16, you have 6 more years. Those 6 years go by so quickly. Start planning now. So I would say any electives, take those electives that are really important. Start talking about adult transition. Start talking about the skills that student will need to go into an adult transition program and to be out in the community one day, right? And individualize that piece. So do you see the student as someone who might work in customer service, right? Might work at a store with people because they're very social. Then let's make sure we have really good social goals and we're working along with other things on that piece. Is your student someone who loves computer and they're just amazing when it comes to IT and coding? Let's make sure we're working on those skills and front loading all those skills that they're going to need someday. So really taking a look as best possible of what life might look like and back plan, making sure you're working on the skills that student is going to need, whatever they do later in life. And then when they get to adult transition, I think it's so important to get them out in the community as much as possible. So they're not sitting on the couch when they turn 21 or 22 and they're no longer with the district. So I love adult transition and I help students. I will go to businesses and I will go to, I have a student who's doing an internship at a retirement home because this student has a high level of care, but he also likes helping others. So we thought, like a retirement home might be kind of a cool idea. So his teacher at the time went around to the community because we try to keep our students in our local community and said, the student is going to come with a one-to-one. They have support. Is there any opportunity? And it's been 2.5 years now. And the student is a caring companion, has made some amazing friendships with 90-year-old. Yeah. But it's such a win-win. And I have students who work in surf shops. I have students who work in local restaurants. And then the community gets to know them, right? They're getting some job experience, some volunteer experience. People know them out in the community. And I would say for as much as you can, keep those up, right? So when I have students and they tell me they have 2 internships that are working well through the district, well, parents, case manager, whoever, go talk to those people and say, after school, can they keep this up once a week, twice a week? It's working. Maybe it's a possibility, maybe it's not. But, for those students who require supported work, they're always going to come with an adult. And very often, here anyway, it's paid through the Department of Rehabilitation. So it could look different ways, but definitely form those connections and those work opportunities, internships while the student is still in the district.
Yeah, such good advice. Thank you for that. I'm so glad we did that. So Vicki, I see a book behind you. Any chance you want to talk about your book? Let's do it.
I would love to. And so I wrote a book in 2025. And I talk to parents all the time, every day. It's what I do, whether they're clients, whether just parents who call me up and have questions. And I just felt that I really I've been an advocate for over 15 years. I've been a parent of a child with special needs for over 21 years. And I have things that I would love to share with other parents, but it's difficult. There's not like that one place where parents could go, right? With IEPs or with, special needs, and they could learn everything they need. I wish there was. I wish somebody would create that. But so I thought, well, maybe I could put it down in a book and I can share our story, but not just our story, like the lessons I have learned along the way. So what I wrote is a book. It's called Uniquely Fully Enough, The Neurodivergent Parenting Journey, a memoir and a handbook. So each chapter, it starts from pre-birth to Luke's birth, his diagnosis, the early days, the appointments, the therapies, entering the school system, the public school system at 2 years old, which in itself was crazy. And then through school, I talk about having other children and balancing a sibling, right? Or siblings when you have a child who's neurodivergent or children who are neurodivergent. I talk about marriage and the strain it could put on a marriage and family and finding your village. And I talk about transitioning into adulthood for those parents who have to conserve their children. I write about our experience with that. And it's the book that I could have used 21 years ago.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
And I really try to write it. It's a story. And I don't sugarcoat anything. It's hard. And I write that. It's hard, but I still love my son. With everything, right? Both exist.
Yes.
That's okay to acknowledge that it's tough. Like Luke, he has a high level of caregiving that he needs every day. So it's the book I could have used 21 years ago. And I write it in a very just kind of real, raw kind of way. I try to weave in some humor. And then each chapter ends with what I call a love lesson from a mom. And it's really from this stage in our journey, what I took from it and what some parents might be able to use today. So there's supposed to be tips that you can use today.
Okay. Well, as you're talking, I'm like, okay, we need to do another episode just on the book because you have just way too much information that people need to hear. So that's amazing. I'm going to put everything in the show notes. But Vicki, is there anything I didn't ask that you would really love to share?
Let me think about this for a second. I think if we're talking about school and to the parents who are listening, if there is something in your intuition or your gut that's telling you that your student is struggling, talk to your teachers. Maybe request that they're assessed. I think I had that feeling in my gut for so many years when my 17-year-old was in elementary school, but I had his older brother who had a lot of needs. And I kept thinking, well, I don't know. Like, I don't have a typical child. So he seems to be doing okay. But if something is telling you that something's not right, act on it. Definitely. And then if your child has a 504 plan or has an IEP, it's that communication piece between parent, teacher, special education teacher to general education teacher, student to everyone. Teach those skills and encourage communication and find your village to parents. That too. That's really good. Ask around, find your local village, the people who you can see, right? Who have resources that are available in your own community.
Your village is not in Facebook, just in case you didn't hear me the first time. Sit down and listen.
It is not.
Thank you so much, Vicki. I am so honored that we sat down. This is such important information, and I just love that we shared this. And everything will be in the show notes. I appreciate everyone listening or watching on YouTube. This is the one to share because it might not apply directly to you, but I can guarantee somebody who's got a kid with an IEP. I can pretty much guarantee it. I put my money on it. So this is the one to share. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. before you go, I really want you to know something. I'm not just a podcaster. I'm a speaker, a published author, and the founder of Insight to Impact. I'm an educational strategist and family advocate with over 25 years of experience helping families and schools support teenagers from diagnosis to IEPs to interpreting assessments to high school transitions and beyond. This podcast, Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's World, is part of my mission to help parents understand schools, support their teens, and feel heard and seen at the table. If today's episode helped you, please subscribe or follow the show, share it with another parent, and leave a review. It truly helps families find the support, and I'm very grateful when you do these things. And if your teen is struggling in school, navigating a new diagnosis, or you need help preparing support at school, you can work with me directly through educational consulting or my 90-day advocacy program. Just visit CherylPankhurst.com to learn more and to book a complimentary consultation to see if I can help. I know parenting is frickin' hard, but if you're listening to podcasts, if you're reading the books, if you're looking for answers, you are not failing because you're still trying. You do not have to figure this out alone. I got you, and we'll see you next week.